Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today we are jumping into, well, one of the most demanding and complex universes in all of gaming, EVE Online. We've got a whole stack of community sources here, forum posts, dev notes, even open letters from Alliance leaders, and they're all pointing towards this collective sigh of exhaustion.
That's a good way to put it. Our mission today is to really dig into that source material from the last few weeks, late November, early December 2024.
Right.
And we're trying to understand this idea the community is calling cautious fatigue.
Cautious fatigue. Okay, let's unpack that.
It's this tension, right? You have a game that is built entirely on these fierce, player-driven social and economic structures.
Yeah, a game that's more like a lifestyle for many.
Exactly.
Huh.
But what happens when that game fails to deliver polished content at a pace the community expects? That's the fatigue.
So this incredible dedication is being tested by what seems to be a pattern of, well, incomplete releases and these constant economic tweaks. It's just wearing people down.
And we can see this reflected in, I think, three key areas we're going to explore. First, the grind of seasonal events.
Okay.
Then there's the long shadow cast by two big, but sort of incomplete, expansions, Equinox and Revenant.
And what's the third?
And finally, some really serious structural problems involving bots and the pretty awful onboarding experience for new players.
Let's start with the most immediate thing then, the seasonal grind. We're right in the middle of the Winter Nexus event.
We are. It runs from December 5th to January 7th, 2025.
So this should be a fun, festive thing. Why are players treating it like it's mandatory overtime?
Because the rewards are they're too good to ignore. And that turns the whole thing into a chore. The sources are pretty clear. People are grinding this event for PLX. That's player experience currency, which you can, turn into game time or sell for huge amounts of ISK, the in-game money.
So it feels less like an optional party and more like a required injection of wealth into your account.
Precisely. It feels mandatory.
Okay, so if the payoff is that big, everyone's going to want in. How do they actually get these rewards?
Well, the event offers three main paths. You've got combat sites, mining or harvesting, and then exploration data sites.
The three pillars of EVE, basically.
Now, the combat route, what players are calling the hard way, is by far the most lucrative. But it has a huge barrier to entry.
Which is?
To do it efficiently, to really make money,
you
almost need to be flying a high-end battleship like a Marauder.
Okay, so for a listener who isn't deep into EVE, what does a Marauder mean? Why is that such a barrier?
A Marauder is... it's basically the top-of-the-line battleship for this kind of PvE content. They're incredibly expensive. We're talking billions of ISK to buy and fit one.
Billions.
Yeah. They have superior defenses, what players call tanking, and just massive damage. So by making a Marauder almost a requirement, you immediately lock out a huge number of players.
Anyone without a ton of existing wealth or a big alliance backing them up.
Exactly. It's a filter based purely on your economic status in the game.
Wow. So a seasonal event, which should be bringing people in, is actually just reinforcing the wealth gap. The rich get richer.
That's the complaint, yes. And it's not like the other paths are a walk in the park.
Right.
The mining path, the so-called easy way, is accessible, sure, but the resources are limited. So everyone powers in, competition goes through the roof, and players end up fighting over rocks instead of actually mining. It just adds to the frustration.
So if even the holiday events feel like a job, let's look at the actual expansions. Let's talk about the big updates, starting with Equinox, which launched way back in June 2024.
Yeah, Equinox cast a very long shadow.
It was supposed to revitalize nullsec space, right? The big player-owned territories. What went wrong?
The fallout was huge because it brought scarcity back into nullsec.
Which was the opposite of what was promised.
The exact opposite. The developers have been talking about returning to abundance. The expansion was meant to change how sovereignty systems work. That's the whole mechanism for how alliances claim and hold space.
And sovereignty is everything in EVE. It's the core of their entire political game. What were these new systems supposed to do?
They were supposed to give leaders more control, create new strategic weak points, and, encourage more dynamic wars.
What they didn't.
They really didn't. The systems were seen as just underwhelming, not enough economic value, and they failed to create the social experiences they were designed for. We saw open letters from leaders of huge alliances saying these changes were actively discouraging conflict.
And this is where it gets really interesting, right? The pattern of incomplete delivery. The sources say that features from Equinox weren't just bad, some of them literally didn't work at launch.
The prime example is the mercenary dens. These were supposed to be key strategic targets.
Okay.
But they launched without any combat sites in them, and, this is the critical part, they failed to drain warfare points like they were supposed to.
Okay, for the nullsec player, why is that a disaster and not just a small bug?
Because those warfare points are how big alliances manage and upgrade their territory. If the dens don't drain those points, the whole strategic reason for them to exist just evaporates.
The tension is gone.
Completely. The very thing meant to create conflict was broken. It took patches weeks later to fix it, which just reinforces this feeling that the players are beta testing major features after they've already launched.
And speaking of features, let's fast forward to the most recent expansion, Revenant, EVE's 50th, launched November 12th.
That's right.
It brought in new ships, new weapons, but there's one little feature that seems to perfectly capture this whole feeling of indifference and incomplete vision, the Evermarks push.
Oh, Evermarks.
Yeah.
They've been a frustration for a long time. They were brought in as like a reward for just doing daily activities. You're meant to buy cosmetics with them.
But nobody wanted them.
The community found them largely useless, yeah. The rewards just weren't worth the effort.
So what was Revenant's brilliant fix for this useless currency?
Well, it introduced the ability to spend your Evermarks to, get this, complete your daily AR tasks.
Wait, so you spend the currency you earn from doing tasks? To skip doing tasks.
To earn more of the exact same currency, yeah.
That's a perfect closed loop of irrelevance.
It is, and the community sees it as the developers just doubling down on a failed system instead of cutting their losses and putting resources somewhere else.
It really feels like that core complaint is dead on. They're watching the devs spend all their time fixing yesterday's problems instead of shipping something that's actually finished today.
Absolutely, and that leads directly into our next segment, which gets at the very integrity of the game's economy. That blurring line between legitimate multiboxing and outright bot farming.
So what's the specific activity that's causing all the discussion here?
It centers on a PvE activity called Homefront Operations. These are pretty lucrative tasks you can do in high-security space. And veteran players are reporting that if you run 5 optimized characters at once, which is a common practice called multiboxing, you can make somewhere around 500 million ISK an hour.
500 million an hour. That is serious in-game money. How does that link to botting?
Because that kind of profit makes it a perfect target for bots. And the line between one person paying for 5 accounts and a bot farm running dozens of accounts with similar names, well, it gets incredibly blurry. It's hard to tell them apart.
And all that automated wealth generation has to be devaluing the effort of players who are actually playing the game.
Massively.
Yeah.
And here's the fascinating part. Multiboxing, one person with 5 paid subscriptions, is totally legitimate. It helps CCP's bottom line.
Right. So what's the community reaction to how CCP is handling the actual bots?
It's frustration. Players say they report the same bot accounts, see them get banned, and then they're back within hours.
So the barrier to re-entry is just too low.
It seems so. The Steam discussions are full of people demanding a harder stance. Some are even calling for 1 account per person just to kill the problem at its source.
That raises such a fundamental question, doesn't it? What happens to the social fabric of an MMO when the best way to get rich is through automation, not cooperation?
The social consequence is profound. We're seeing veteran players say that multiboxing has made EVE feel more and more like a single-player game.
Why bother recruiting friends if you can just do it all yourself with multiple accounts?
Why recruit 3 friends when one person can just multi-box all the roles they need? A single solo account becomes, well, kind of unnecessary for a lot of high-end activities. It undermines the whole massively multiplayer part of the name.
So if the veterans are feeling this fatigue, what about the newcomers? The lifeblood of any MMO, how are they doing?
Oh, the sources paint a very grim picture for new player retention.
The new player experience, the MPE.
It's failing. The main tutorial system, the AR career missions, they just don't teach people how to actually play. Some of the missions are reportedly just broken, forcing new players to go to outside websites just to figure out the tutorial.
And you mentioned they get hit with a lot right away. What's happening in that first hour?
Within about 45 minutes of logging in for the first time, a new player is just bombarded with store ads and FOMO, fear of missing out promotions.
Before they even know what's going on.
Before they know how to dock their ship, they're seeing complex currency bundles, limited time ship sales, And critical things, like how the market works, are not explained at all.
Which leads us to that retention statistic. It's pretty stark, isn't it?
It is. The user reviews are consistent. 9 out of 10 new players quit within the first month.
9 out of 10. Wow.
And to add insult to injury, the one place that's supposed to be safe for them, high security, space, or high sec, it completely fails as a sanctuary.
Why? What's happening in high sec?
Veteran gankers, they camp the popular systems in cheap disposable ships. It's called suicide ganking. They just blow up the new player ships.
So a new player spends days grinding for their first little mining ship.
And it just gets vaporized in seconds by someone who faces almost no consequences. It's a vicious cycle that punishes them for the very effort they just put in.
Now, the hardcore players will argue that's just EVE.
Right.
That ganking teaches you about risk, that it's part of the game's brutal identity.
They absolutely do. The classic advice is make your own fun and embrace the harshness of it all. But that creates this huge divide.
I can see that.
A new player is facing broken tutorials, they're getting ganked, they're being overwhelmed by store ads, the game feels obtuse, there's very little actual interactive gameplay to hook them before they quit. You can't make your own fun if you can't even get through the front door.
We've covered a lot of ground here. Incomplete content, broken economies, botting, a failing new player experience. Let's talk about the final piece that seems to tie it all together, customer service.
Yeah, the customer service situation, based on recent reviews and forum posts, just adds this layer of emotional strain on top of everything else.
So.
Players are reporting that they'll submit a ticket for a problem, and a game master, a GM, will just close it as solved, without actually providing any resolution.
Oh, that would be infuriating.
And there's a perception in the community that the GMs often seem to know less about the game's mechanics than the veteran players who are asking for help.
So the dialogue is just not constructive.
Not at all. Longtime players are saying that getting a satisfactory solution, if it happens at all, can take months, not days or weeks.
Months. Okay, let's try to synthesize all of this. It feels like there are 5 core things driving this cautious fatigue.
Let's hear them.
1, expansions like Equinox and Revenant are arriving half-finished. 2, big economic shifts like scarcity returning to nullsec are destabilizing the whole landscape. 3, events feel like mandatory grinds, not fun diversions. 4, the new player experience is so bad that 90% of new blood just leaves. And 5, multiboxing culture is making solo play feel pointless and undermining social cooperation.
That's a perfect summary. And what's really fascinating, but the sources all seem to conclude, is that the players who are still engaged, they're the ones who are deeply embedded in big corporations and alliances.
Their social structure protects them from the game's problem.
Exactly. Their internal supply chains, their shared goals. That's what mitigates all these mechanical issues.
Yeah.
They're playing for their friends, not necessarily because the game itself is in a great state.
So the people who rely on the core systems the most, the solo players, the small groups, the new guys, they're the ones getting left behind.
That's it. Precisely. And the final demand from the community, time and again, is actually pretty simple. Finish what you start.
Stop building on a shaky foundation.
Yes. Stop releasing features that are just placeholders for future fixes. The players want a complete, polished experience now, and they want a clear vision for the economy long term.
That is a really clear snapshot of what happens when a developer prioritizes promises of future fixes over delivering a complete experience today.
It really is. And it raises a serious question for any developer of a game this complex. If your entire MMO is built on social interaction, what happens to the social contract between you and your players when the systems you control actively push out new people and reward automation over cooperation? What part of that stands out to you as the most dangerous symptom?
And that question really does summarize the stakes in New Eden right now. Thank you for walking us through this. This was an intense deep dive.
It's always a pleasure.
We really appreciate you sharing the sources and your insight with us. Until next time, keep exploring.